Welcome back to our workshop. Today I'm working on this roll-top desk that came out of an old farmhouse. I can visually see there are a few things wrong with it. The roll-top isn't opening all the way. The pedestal on the left here is coming apart and I've got this loose piece. And the finish on the top is really worn. Now I'm not going to strip and refinish this piece. That would make it look new. What I'm going to do is preserve the history, but clean up the finish and get it set in a way it's going to last for decades to come. Now working on a piece like this, I can only see what's going on the outside, not the inside. So there might be a little bit more work here. Stick with me, I'll show you how it's done.
As a furniture repair business, we're opening the doors to our workshop to show you the tools and techniques to repair furniture.
The front rail here, you can see this has been broken off.
We give you tips to make your repair projects easier. Let's get into the workshop and start fixing furniture.
When I first saw this desk, I was really impressed with it. It's hard to appreciate in my small workshop here, so when the customer dropped it off outside, I took some video so you can see it from all angles. You can see here at the back, this is where the pedestal is coming apart. This is the major issue the customer asked me to fix. The first part I'm going to work on is this pedestal because I know there are so many issues with it. So I just need to unscrew the top and then separate it from the pedestals. As I work on the underside, you can see here there's a crackled finish, and this is an aged finish. I'm not seeing this on the outside, so I think at one point it had a new coat of finish put on it. When I'm restoring furniture, I find every piece has a little bit of a story to tell. And this top was held on by all these screws, and there are about 5 different sizes of screws in here. Which means this wasn't the original set of screws that were used to put this on. So someone's been working on this desk at least once before me. I can now take the top off. Just close that up. Oh, it's hung up on something. It looks like there's a peg here going through the top, so I'm going to have to lift it up higher. Take a closer look here. This is the apron, and then this is where I was taking the screws out. And they rotate, perfect. So this allows for wood movement. That's what we want. And what is this? Oh, it's mechanical. Oh, I wonder if that is a drawer lock. Let's check this out. Yeah, these won't open. Let me put something heavy on here. It's like Indiana Jones style. And let's see what happens. Haha! Oh, that's cool. So this must somehow get triggered by the roll top getting opened and pushed down here. Well, that's pretty cool. I'm going to turn my attention to this pedestal over here that's falling apart and get it back together, and I'll have to make sure I check out all the mechanics and make sure I get them working too. Now if you can't tell, I've got a relatively small workshop. I'm in a single car garage, and someday I'll make a video about working in a small space. I'm going to take the apron off of this. I'll move this out of the way on some padding and then get the pedestal up on the workbench. Now rather than lift this whole piece up on the workbench, I'm just going to take it apart in pieces. Oh, that's interesting. So this slides out here and it doesn't come out any further because there's a peg here. So interesting design. I'm going to take each of these, oops, I just noticed that as I'm pulling this out, this mechanical piece is coming out. So I have to lift this up to get the drawers out. As I pull out each drawer, I need to label them. So I'm going to label this left 1. And you can see some marks here on the drawer. Kids were writing in here. This is an heirloom, and these actually have meaning to the owner. So another example of why you don't want to strip and refinish things. Some good memories there. And as I pull this out, I'll just check and make sure all the joinery on the drawers is tight. Here's a loose joint, so I'll have to glue that when I put this back together again. Ooh, this drawer's come right apart. I'll have to get that back in the slot to see if I can get this drawer out. With all the drawers out, you can now see that whole side is separated there, and there's some separation down here as well. This looks like it should be lined up here. So it all needs to be reglued. I've also got this extra piece that came out, and it looks like at the front there's a matching piece. And that post looks like it was intended for a foot of some sort. So I'm guessing this needs to be glued in at the bottom over there as well. We'll get these drawers set aside here, and we'll get the patient up on the operating table. So all the joinery at the front is solid. So back here, it's just a matter of gently pulling it apart, and then we'll reglue the pieces back in again. When you look at the back here, you can see just how open this is. So this is something called frame and panel. This is the panel on the inside, and this is the frame. The panel never gets glued because the panel needs to move with wood movement. And that's why this is constructed this way. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 rails on this whole thing, and that allows these 3 panels here to move with the seasonal wood movement. So this area is where I need glue. No glue here. This needs to be glued. This needs to be glued. On this side of the desk, this is the inside of the desk. You can see this panel here has also separated, so it's coming apart. And on the other side, the panel is also coming apart, but there's a bit more of a problem. There's a piece of wood missing right here. So it's split out, and I don't have a piece. So I'm going to have to do some repair work here. Maybe the best thing to do is take this hole back off and repair that and put it back together. I wonder if I can gently pull this apart without making a mess. That doesn't want to come apart. Oh, I see part of the problem. So here the panel is separated and this split off. On the other side, we're missing a whole piece. So this is loose, but this joint up here doesn't seem to have any movement to it. So I use vinegar for this. Just squeeze some vinegar into the joint. Let it sit for about 5 minutes. And the acid in the vinegar breaks down the protein in the glue. Another way you could try to unglue this is to use a heat gun, but I prefer not to risk damaging the finish or the wood. Household vinegar works really well. I'm going to get it with my mallet. We'll see if we can get this apart. Now as I move the bottom out, I should be able to loosen it up. There we go. You can now see this piece of wood that's missing. So this is a dado that's in this, and this part here is starting to split off, but I can glue that back on. Over here, it's broken off, and it actually looks like it's been broken off so long that someone's put a coat of stain on here. So there's the stain board, there's the unstained board. I'd expect this break here to be the same color as this raw wood, and it's not. So more evidence that someone else has done some work on this. To patch a piece in here, I need to make sure I've got a really straight line. If I chiseled this out and had a bit of variation in here, I wouldn't get a strong glue joint. So the best way to get a straight line is on the table saw. Now I need to cut just 1/4 inch in the depth here, and when you're not cutting all the way through, you can't have a blade guard on. So the first step is to take that off. Okay, so now I can set the depth of the blade. And now to cut this part out here, I'll need to make sure I've got a couple things set. The first is I need to know where my teeth are biting. So I need a line out here. And that way I know when to stop the cutting on my piece here. So I'm going to take out this part here. I'm just going to draw a line here to approximate that. Now to do that, I'm just going to take this and extend it out. Now move the fence over. I set the fence to the right width. And then as I push through here, this line here and this line here, when they line up, I'm going to pull this back and I'll have a nice straight line here. So the cut line here, it's looking nice and straight. And what I'm going to do now is use a handsaw to cut out this portion here, chisel it out, and we'll be ready to fit a new piece in. If I cut this off square, it's going to be easier for the eye to see that. So if I cut it on an angle here, it's easier to disguise the repair. I love the accuracy of cut I can get with this Dizuki saw. This is made by Gyokujo, and I've got a couple more of their saws here in my cabinet. I'll leave a link in the video description for this. Now I'll quickly break out the edge here, just so I can see where I need to chisel. And then I'll work my way from the point down to the lower edges. Here's my notch, and this is an oak board, so I need to match it with oak. White oak to white oak, this is going to get the best match in here. But you can see here, there's a knot in this board, and the grain comes up and goes around here. The straight grain here is what I'm looking for. So what I'm going to do is turn this around, and I'll show you up close. The grain is on a bit of an angle this way, and I want something straight grain, so this isn't going to work. The grain is fairly spaced out here, but here it's much tighter together. The problem on this side is, You'll notice there's a bit of a ray fleck through here. It's kind of hard to see that, but this is what you see in quarter sawn oak. And the way this board has been cut, you're starting to get into quarter sawn oak over here. So what I'm going to do is cut a strip off of here. The face over here will not be quarter sawn, and that will get me the piece I'm looking for. With the angle cut, you can just double check the fit, and we've got a nice tight fit there. We're ready for the glue up. I'll just put this in the vise, make it easier for gluing up. And I'm using PVA glue for this because I want a permanent bond. You'll see me using hide glue, but that's in cases where there is joinery, and you might want to take that joinery apart in the future. So PVA is the right glue for this job, and I prefer to put it on both sides of the joint. That way, it just gives me a little insurance. I've got enough glue for the job. Clamping on here is going to be delicate just to make sure I line everything up and get gluing pressure. So it's nice and flush here. It's a little bit proud here, meaning it's sticking up higher than this, and this is a little bit higher here. But you can see I've got glue squeeze out here. That's exactly what we want to see when gluing things up. I need this to sit for 24 hours to make sure that glue is coming to full strength. There are really 3 different things you should be looking at on your glue bottle. The first one is open time or assembly time. That's how long you have from when you apply the glue to when you have to have everything assembled. The second one is clamping time. This one tells me I've got 30 to 90 minutes it needs to sit in the clamps. But that doesn't mean that it's come to full strength. The third one is cure time. This takes 24 hours to cure, and that means it's coming to full strength. And I want this at full strength before I start machining it because I could be weakening it otherwise. The next step is for me to work on these drawers and get them glued together. So I'll set this out of the way. And this is where I'm going to pull out hide glue. So I've got 2 different types of hide glue here. And what I'm going to do is use hide glue to repair these, because if there's a problem with the drawer in the future, hide glue will allow me to take that apart, replace a part, and put it back together again. So it's really important to use a glue that's reversible. Now I've got a small groove here I've got to get glue into, and I can only open this up so far. So what I'm going to use is a blunt tip syringe. Put that tip on, and then I'm taking the liquid hide glue and adding it in here, and that'll allow me to inject it into that tight spot there. Now when you're gluing drawers together, it's really important that you're not gluing the bottom of the drawer in. A bottom of a drawer is always loose. It's the ends here that need the glue. So just some glue along the seam here on both sides, and we'll be good to go. I'll just add a clamp on here, tighten it up, and then we're ready to move on to the next drawer. These 4 are glued up, and I still have some clamps in my clamp rack. So I'm going to pull out the drawers from the other pedestal, glue them up, and then I've got about 90 minutes to wait. So it's a perfect time for me to slip out of the workshop and get a haircut.
Please give us a thumbs up so more people will see our videos.
Everything's been clamped up long enough here I can take the clamps off, and when it was off camera I clamped up this file drawer. Take a look at it, it's pretty cool. You can see these dividers built in here. This would have been for file storage before they had hanging files. So a great way to keep those separated, and a little pocket at the back here, so great use of the storage space. I'll unclamp everything here, get these drawers set aside, and then I'll put down some padding and we'll bring in the desktop. We'll take a look at it. It looks like there are screws here that are holding on the top. So I'll take this apart and we'll look at the tambour and figure out why the roll top isn't opening all the way. Okay, so I'll take this off and we'll see what's jamming it up. Oh, wow. Look at this cavity. That's why the roll top isn't rolling back. I suspect it's supposed to roll back to here. So there's probably about that much stuff jammed in here. I'm going to set this aside and let's take a look. So just put a glove on. I'm not sure what's in here. But what's probably happened is there's a gallery here where the roll top moves up and down. Someone probably set things on top of this gallery, and this, just over the years, they've accumulated down in here. There's a pencil. A little ad. Oh, it says Davy Crockett on it. There's a little star decoration. What's this? Oh, an old-fashioned magnet. Looks like a game piece. Just gently take all this paper out, and then we can take a look at it. Oh, wow. Check this out, a ruler. Ted Jackson Auctioneer. Oh, there's a stamp. Okay, so we're starting to get into something valuable. Let's take a look at this up close. So there's a 1-cent stamp. I'm not sure what that would be worth, but definitely worth hanging on to. We'll see what other treasures are buried in here. This next thing here says Family Journal monthly number. Maybe we've got a date on this. You can see the date there, May 1966. There's a big chunk of something here. What's all this? Oh, there's a book in here. Oh, we even got a live spider. There's a book of some sort. Oh, it's got some names in it. Some writing. And what's this? Oh, it's a 5-cent coupon. A turkey coupon from Red and White. That's an old grocery store from Canada. Another coupon, but you can see there's handwriting there. So this might have some interesting family history for the owner. There's certainly lots in here. I'll go for another grab bag and see what we... Oh, here's another yardstick. Where's this one from? Farmers Mutual Fire Insurance Company, Lindsay. So this was from 1970, celebrating 75 years of continuous service. That's in really good shape. Oh, I remember these. Chiclets. Little packages of gum. Used to get those at Halloween. And another turkey coupon. This is, oh, that's a picture of someone building a house. Well, it looks like we're getting closer to the bottom here. Oh, there we go. That's the release. So here's the top of the roll top. So you can see here as I push this up, this moves up. So this is probably as far back as that went. Oh, here's a letter with a 5-cent stamp on it. And some more photos. Oh, this is a recipe card divider for sandwiches. So this is postage, and inside here is a beautiful stamp. Check that out. That might have some value for the owner. Pretty cool. So it looks like a hockey player just by the clothing, the shoulder pads. And it says Hal, it's hard to read. Ledyard? Winnipeg Bombers? If you know who that is, let me know in the comments. What have we got here? Great Northwestern Telegraph Company. This is sent from Port Perry, February 14th, 1920. Here's everything that came out of the back of that desk, including some old negatives. So I was a little ambitious thinking that I could get everything in this plastic here, but some of the stuff needs to be protected, like these stamps. So I'll make sure it gets packaged up nice and neat and get this back to the customer. With the top vacuumed off, we can now look at the finish. So back here, this would be some of the original finish, but up front you can see how worn it is. There's a couple of problems with the finish. So here, it looks like something has been stuck to it, maybe a newspaper, and it's a little bit worn across the front. And over here, there's another spot that needs some attention. So the first step is to test the finish. I suspect it's a shellac, and if it is, that's relatively easy to repair. I'm going to start by cleaning off the top, but before I do, I want to take the hardware out. And a tip for you when you're dealing with slotted screws, use a knife to clean out the slot as much as you can. Sometimes finish builds up in there, and if you just put your slotted screwdriver in there and give it a twist, you could end up really stripping the head there. So see all that finish that's coming out of there? That'll help make sure that when I put the screwdriver in, it seats really well, and I can turn the screw. The first step is to clean this off with a degreaser. So I'm using something called Spray 9. There's something else called Crud Cutter that I've seen people use as well. So I need to saturate this. Just let it sit for a minute. And then what I use is synthetic steel wool to go through and clean it off. You can see some of these white bubbles are already turning brown just from the dirt that's on the surface here. I'll wipe this off and we'll see how we're doing. Wow, look at all that dirt. So all of that needs to come off before we can even attempt to do anything with the finish. You can see that area where it looked like there was paper stuck here. It's coming off clean, so that's great. I'll give you the before and after here. So you can see there's a bit of dirt here. There's a lot right here. It's almost black. And then we've got this mark here. So spray this on. Let it sit for a minute. And then give it a scrub. If you look right here, you can see the bubbles. They're already turning brown. So it's time to give it a scrub and get this cleaned up. And as I'm scrubbing this, what I'm doing is I'm rubbing with the grain because this pad is slightly abrasive. And that way I'm not putting scratches into the surface that are going to be noticeable. Let's take a look and see what it looks like. But just look at that. All that dirt that's in there. This really needed some TLC. On the back here behind this, you can see there's so much dust there. It just doesn't want to wipe out with paper towel. So a little bit of spray 9. Let's see what it does. Wow, that brought it back in a hurry. Nice. Now just to clean off anything that's remaining, I'm going to use some mineral spirits and wipe it down. That way I'll make sure I've got no contaminants that would be playing with the finish. So you can see the finish is already looking much better, but there are some spots that have paint on them here and here, so I need to scrape those off. My preferred method for dealing with stuff like this is a plastic razor blade, so it can really peel things off without damaging the finish. But in both of these cases, it seems like they're really level with the finish. So that's where a traditional razor blade comes in. What I do is I just use the corner to dig in slightly into that finish and chip this piece out. Now, depending on what type of wood you're working with, this might be easier than others. With oak, there's open grain, so those dark lines are grain lines, and the darker areas are actually voids. So they're going to be deeper, but I just gently work my way around until I can get all of that color off. The reason I prefer the plastic razor blade is because it doesn't really damage or dig into the finish, but this one was really below the surface of the finish. So this is going to require a bit of a touch-up to disguise this mark. Another technique is a bit of a scraping action. So I'll try it here. And the idea is to get the paint off without hopefully going through the finish. So you can see there, as I'm scraping away, I'm getting some of that dark green. That's great. But this is a process you really have to make sure you stop before you get carried away with it. Here's a spot where there's a glob of something sticking on there. Let's just check, see if the plastic razor blade, yeah, see, this just peels it right off. Perfect. It's unfortunate that the back corners have paint on them. It's almost like someone was painting against the wall and didn't want to move the furniture. So I've got to gently work this off and get it back to just hopefully the finish without having to do any stain touch-ups. The last part of the cleanup is this residue that's underneath where the top gets attached. So I'm just taking a chisel, clearing it out so we can get this cleaned up, and then we'll test the finish. Now, I'm taking this off with a chisel. The scraper doesn't seem to do much, but the technique that seems to work best is to get the bulk of this out with the chisel and then give it a bit of a scrape to get it right down to the bare wood. I'll give it one more scrub down here just to clean it off, and then we'll take a look. So with it all cleaned up, you can see there's a shine here, so this is the finish. There's a bit of a shine here, there's a finish, and this is bare wood. So I was likely cleaning off adhesive here. And when they attach this, there's a bit of a problem. You see there's a crack right across here, and there's another one right around here. And what's happening is we've got wood movement. This is solid oak, an inch thick, and in the summertime it expands with humidity, In the wintertime, it contracts as the humidity gets less and less in the air. And season over season, this is what starts to develop. Now this is just cosmetic at this point, but if I don't fix this, this crack will continue on into the piece. So this shouldn't be glued down. The screw holes need to be elongated so it allows for the wood movement. So when I finish this, I'm going to put the finish right over top here because there's no need to glue it. Now I'm using denatured alcohol, and what I'm doing is I'm going to test in a few different spots here and figure out what type of finish we have. So with denatured alcohol, if this is a shellac finish, it'll get sticky, and that is sticky right there. That's sticky as well, and that is sticky. Okay, so what that's telling me is this is a shellac finish, which is great because shellac is an easy finish to repair, and I'll be able to put a couple coats on here and get it protected. You see how there are some layer spots here? This is where the finish is no longer there. So what it's telling me is the finish is holding the color. So I'm using Garnet Shellac. This is very dark shellac, and what I'm going to do is pat it on these areas here that are lacking the finish, and that way what I'll do is deepen the color, so when I put on the shellac in the rest of the area, they'll be less noticeable. Now, as I mentioned at the start, this is not going to be a video about refinishing. This is about repairing a finish. So this shellac dries very rapidly. And you can see it's already starting to look better. So I'll just pat on a little bit more in these areas that need some touch up to get that color more rich. Now on the top of the gallery, there's also an issue with the finish. So I'll turn this over so you can see it. So I need to go through and clean and prep this as well, and then I'll put the finish on both at the same time. Before I move on to finishing, this is the piece I'm repairing. There's a split back here. I just want to glue this up and get it in clamps so I can move on to this piece once I'm done putting a coat of finish on. So there's good glue squeeze out. So I'll clamp that and we're good to go. I'm ready to mask off the piece here. I don't want any of the finish dripping, so let me just grab a section of this, cut it off, and then I'll use masking tape to secure it in place. I'm applying the finish just to this top edge here, so I want to make sure I'm not going to drip anything down here and make a mess. So a little investment of time here of masking will just give me some assurance that it's all going to turn out okay. There's just a few spots here that are a little bit lighter, so I'm going to use a graining marker and just fill those in. Now I'm using shellac that I've mixed up from shellac flakes, and it's very thick. It's like syrup, and it's far too thick to put on. But when you mix it up from shellac flakes, the purpose is to get those shellac flakes dissolved, which I've done here, and then mix it up as you need it. So I need to get this 8-pound cut down to a 2-pound cut, which means if I take one portion of this, just cover that back up and mix it up with denatured alcohol, then that'll get me the 8-pound or the 2-pound cut that I need to brush this on. So 1, 2, 3. So stir that up a little bit, cover this back up. Now you can see we've got a nice thin consistency here. That's exactly what we want. Now I've got out a foam brush here. This is something you can't use with shellac. It will actually break down as you use it. You need to be using a natural bristle brush for this. And you can see I got a little messy last time I used this, so I just need to make sure I'm wearing a glove. And that way I won't get the shellac on my hands. Now shellac is not a very toxic finish. That's what's nice about it. The most harmful part in it is the denatured alcohol. This is flammable, but it's the alcohol that's evaporating that cures the finish. Okay, we're all ready to go. Now when I'm working on a piece, what I want to do is start at the back and work my way forward. If I work my way this way and I'm working over top, I could end up putting drips on a piece that I've already touched. And with shellac, you can't rebrush the area you've gone over. So I'm just going to quickly go over the back part here. And now the clock is going. I need to keep moving at all times here because this is actually drying as I go. Makes it a little tricky on the ends here where I've got to keep putting finish. But as you can see, it goes on pretty quick. It's the same process here. I'm just going to start at the back and work my way forward, making sure I get full coverage. Now I think what I'm going to do is actually do the sides here first, come all the way around because I've got this natural dividing line where the top gets attached. That'll just make finishing this part easier. And then I'll work in the center after that. Now because this is such a thin finish, I just have to be cautious on the edges here that I'm not overloading it and causing drips to hang over the edge. So I'll put most of the finish on the top here, get that brushed on, and then work my way over the edge. Okay, now it's just back and forth. As I look at the finish, you can see there are problems with different areas on the desktop. This isn't something I can deal with when it's wet, so I have to let it dry and then start to tackle it. The finish is now dry, and the worst spot on this is over on this corner. You can see here the texture of it. It's really bad. So there's a lot of confusion around what to do with a surface like this. This is shellac, and shellac is supposed to cover off anything. There are a couple different problems you can have, some with various polishes you put on that have silicone in them, but in that case you end up with fish eyes, or like little circles, and that's not what this is. We'll take a closer look and you can see it's a bit like a crackled finish. Now if this was an issue where the finish wasn't bonding to the layer below it, this would flake off like sunburnt skin. So that would be an adhesion problem. This is not an adhesion problem. What we've got here is basically a finish underneath that's reacted and dissolved some of the finish and caused this. So what I need to do is now sand this, and I want to sand just enough to take the texture off, and then I'll have to look at building it up in a very thin manner. So I'm going to knock this back with 220 grit sandpaper, and if I take too much off of here, as you've seen before, the finish is actually the color. So if I take it right back to bare wood, I have to then deal with a staining issue. So what I'm looking to do is just take off this texture I've got here, and then I'll hit it again with some more finish. What I want to do is put a blocking layer of shellac in here so that it prevents it from bubbling up and reacting again, and then I can get back to putting on the regular Garnet Shellac. My solution is to use spray shellac, and what I'm going to do is put some light coats down that'll minimize the amount of alcohol seeping into the existing finish, and hopefully that'll block it off, that I can put some Garnet Shellac on top. Now, when using a spray finish like this, I have to wear a respirator with an organic cartridge. I generally avoid using finishes like this, but in this case, it's the right tool for the job. The next step is to wash this down very thoroughly with mineral spirits just to make sure there are no contaminants, and then I can get to spraying. I've been able to cover off the problem area. I ended up putting on 7 light coats. And if you take a close look here, you can see there's still a little bit of texture. That texture is something I need to sand down, but right now, because I've got so many coats on here, I need to really let this harden. If you work shellac before it's really hardened, you'll end up having it ball on you, and it'll just make a mess. And you can see by the surface of this, there's a good reflection on the cabinet. Shellac is always shiny when you use it, and what I need to do is knock that sheen back so it matches the rest of the desk. What I'm going to be doing is putting everything back together again, and then I'll knock that sheen down so I can see exactly how I can get it to match. So that'll be once I put it together, but let me get this out of the way and let this stuff harden while I work on the pedestal and get that back together again.
Be sure to go to our website and subscribe to our newsletter for links to new videos, workshop tips, and more. Now back to fixing furniture.
I've got all the parts on the bench here, and this is the piece I had glued up before that had the split in it. So I now need to trim off this section here, and then I can level it out. As you can see, power tools make quick work of trimming this up, but to level it out, it requires hand tools. A card scraper is the best tool for this. So I just need to put this in the vise, lock it down, and a card scraper has a little bit of a hook on the edge of it, so you can feel it if you're doing this. And all you need to do is flex it a little bit and scrape it in the spot that you want it to. Now, I'm trying very hard not to scrape the existing wood, but I know I'm going to. So when I stain this, I'll have a little bit of a repair to do on the wood itself. So right here it's flat. I've got a bit of a high point here, and it's a little bit high right down to here. So I just need to take that down as gently as I can without touching the finish. So let's see. So you can see there, I'm taking the finish off, but that means it's flush. Got just a little bit more to go here. So there's two ways to judge work like this. One is by the eye, and the other is with the fingertip. And the eye is telling me it looks good, but the finger, not so much. Just a bit of a hump left here, and I'll be done. At that point, I've just taken off enough of the finish, I might as well just go for it. Okay, so I'm just going to feather in that little tip there. Okay, we're good to go. So you can see the existing wood is darker and that grain has really been pronounced. On the new piece, you don't see that. I'm not sure how the grain is going to look, so I'm just going to take a little bit of water, rub it on here, and I'll get a preview. So it's actually looking pretty good. So I'm going to set that grain, and then we can start putting the finish on. The first step is to take some 220 and just sand it down. Just want to make sure it's nice and smooth, ready for the finish. I'm also going to sand down the edges of this finish here, just to get rid of, it seems to have chipped off, just some of the harsh lines there. Now it might seem odd, but I'm using black acrylic paint here. I use the acrylic paint because it soaks into the grain, and then I can sand off the surface, and I've got a nice dark line that I can then put acrylic stain on top, and it gets me that look of old oak. If I use a heat gun, it just speeds along the process. I just have it on the lowest setting. It's as much air as it is heat, so nice and gentle. Now I take the sandpaper and sand off everything but where the grain is. So that's nice and smooth now, and I'm ready to put on the stain, but you can see it's pretty dirty here on the existing finish. So I'm just going to clean that off first, and then I've got a nice clean surface to work with. I have two acrylic stains here, and I don't remember which one is the right one for this process. So I'll just open them both up and pull out a brush. And I have a piece of scrap left over. I think it's probably this darker one. Let's see. Yep, that looks like the right tone. So the nice thing about the stain is you can put on different depths of color as you go through. And if you don't like what you're doing, you can wipe it off. It's looking a little bit red to me, so I might actually need to put a little bit of black in there to get that darker. There's some scars here from when I took off the paint, so I'm just going to touch them up with a graining marker here. And then I can lock everything in with some of the spray shellac. The shellac's now dried on this, and it's time to test fit it on here. It does need a little bit of touch up still, but I don't want to do it in isolation of just looking at this piece. I want to look at it in context of the whole piece. So I need to fit this piece, make sure that joint fits, and then we can glue it together. If you're enjoying this video and would like to support us, please help us get to our 100,000 subscriber goal by the end of 2022. Share this video with others, that'll help us out. Now, because I patched this in here and we've got a joint, I need to make sure that this fits in here before I attempt to put glue on this and realize we got a mistake. So this is something called a dry fit. And what I'll do is line it up at the top and see. Oh. Yeah, it's too tight. I need to widen that out a little bit. I realized that I didn't clean out the glue squeeze out when I glued up this break here. So I'll clean that out. I'm going to take off just a little bit of wood with a sharp chisel and widen that out and then give it a test fit. It should fit snug, but it shouldn't have to be forced. Okay, we'll test fit it again. It lines up at the top here first, and then I can work in the bottom here. Yeah, it's starting to go in. I'll get a clamp out. So I'll put this clamp on here and give it a squeeze, and let's see if it comes together. There we go. With this joint fit, I can now glue everything up. Now there's a number of pieces here I'm going to glue together that all have to come together very quickly because of the glue time. So I'm going to just set up the camera and you can watch and see how that happens. But when you're gluing up something like this, if you're not used to glue ups, you might want to do it in small sections and then assemble everything later. I do it all at once because it's just faster in my workshop. I can get through this piece and on to the next. On the bottom here, I had to get creative with my clamps. I've only got 3 36 inches, so I needed a fourth one. So I've taken one clamp here, clamped them in the middle, and they all come together. I got lucky because this is a straight stretch, but I need to shop for more clamps. I've bought these clamps about 20 years ago, so I'm in the market for some more, and I'm going to be doing a test here on this channel of different clamps, the well-known brand names, as well as some less expensive ones, test them out and see what works best for my workshop. Stay tuned for that video, probably in the next few months. The glue's all dried now, so I can take the clamps off, and it feels good to have this all put together again. Now what I need to do is touch up this little corner here, and I need to clean this side off just to make sure I can see the true color, to make sure I get it matching just perfect. This is the back of the desk, and you can see just how dusty and dirty it is. This is the outside of the desk, and you can see there's some dirt on here too that needs to be washed off. And this is where I need to match the stain. So I'll get this cleaned up. I'm partway through the cleaning here, and I've done the back. You can see what a dramatic difference that is. And on the side here, I've stopped partway through. So I've finished off these three areas here. but not here. And you can see just with a degreaser how much of a difference that makes. I finished cleaning off the side, and look how handsome that is. I'm going to prop it up here, and then I can pay some close attention to this area that I patched in. So up close, you can see where this patch is, and it's slightly lighter than the surrounding area here and here. And there's a bit of texture to it, so I just need to sand it down. I've got 600 grit sandpaper here. That's just to smooth it out. And what I'm seeing is the color that's missing is the same color that's in the Garnet Shellac. Okay, so that's smooth now. I'm just going to take a small pad, put some Garnet Shellac on it, and then wipe that on. See how that starts to blend in? So it'll take a couple coats, but a few more applications like that, and the repair will disappear. You see there's a little bit over here as well. If I just add a little bit of shellac to the pad here, and just lightly go over it, disguise those as well. So you can see this is getting darker and richer, but I want to accentuate these grain lines here. So I'm just going to use a graining marker and get some of these marks a little more pronounced. So as I'm adding grain lines in here, what it's doing is just helping that repair disappear. I've got a few more coats of shellac on here and it's coming in, but I'm just going to use another graining marker to get it a little bit closer in some of these areas where it's a little lighter. So just a few lines like this, rub them in. Essentially, I'm just providing a bit of a tint on the finish to blend it in. A little bit more down here. I'll put a few more coats of shellac on, and I think we'll be good to go. So I've got a couple more coats of shellac on here, and it's all good. The original cut that I made was on an angle here, and then straight down here. You're looking at this dead on, so you're seeing it here, but it's actually going to be sitting on the floor at the back against the wall, so you're never going to be looking at this in this detail. I've got a little ding here that I'll just touch up with the touch-up marker, and we're good to go. With this all fixed, I can now move on to cleaning off the other pedestal, the drawer faces, and then get back to the top. Before I put these drawers back in the pedestal, I need to put this locking system back in place. It's pretty cool. It's just some pieces that have been dated in here with notches. Let me see if I can figure out how it goes back together. This locking piece has a slot in the bottom, and it goes on top of the screw. And I know that in the corner this goes here, so that notch goes there. Cool, it works. I'll put the drawer in here and we'll see how this works. Nice. That's really cool. All those coats of shellac I put on this desktop are now hard, and that's critical for this next step. When I sprayed it on, what was happening was the shellac was going on the low points as well as the high points. So what I'm going to do now is sand it down to take those high points down to the low points to get a nice smooth surface. And to do that, I'm going to be using mineral oil and waterproof sandpaper. I'm going to be using the extra fine, which is a 320 grit. There's also a super fine 400 grit. And these packages have some great detail on the back. Let me just zoom in here and you can see it. So the extra fine is the 320 for sanding between coats, removing bubbles and dust. The super fine is really before your last coat of finish. So I'll take a sheet out of the pack here and I'm going to just get it into quarter sheets. This is a jig I made years ago, and it's really handy. It just uses a hacksaw blade here with a bit of a space, and that cuts sheets into quarters. I'm going to try something new here. I've got this foam packing block that I got. It's really firm, and I'm going to use that as a basis here instead of using a wooden block and see how that works. So I'm just going to put a bit of mineral oil on here and then start rubbing it down with the grain. But before I do, let me show you the before of what this looks like. Now the function of the oil is to lubricate the sandpaper, and you can see here I've got little pieces balled up here. This is showing me a sign that I need to stop using this piece of sandpaper and use another one. So I've done 3/4 here, I've got 1/4 left, and I'm on my 3rd sheet of sandpaper. So it gives you an idea of you can't get through a whole piece like this on one piece of sandpaper. It's about a whole sheet to do this. Well, I think that block worked pretty well for me. There's an edge here that's coming up, so this isn't perfectly flat. If I would have had a sanding block here, I would have been wearing down that front. So that's a keeper. So I've wiped the mineral oil off, and I'm going to use mineral spirits to wipe it down, but you can see there's a little bit of a texture in the front here. This is from the open grain and some damage, and this I could take down to make it perfectly smooth, but that's going to look like a factory finish. This is a vintage piece. It's going to look like it's been used and abused, so that's some of the character I want to keep in this piece. A little bit of mineral spirits here. We'll just get it ready for some more shellac.
When I mentioned earlier that adding a coat of shellac is an easy process, I was referring to this experience, not this experience. I wanted to show this to you so you could see the extreme of what might happen in an old finish.
Here's a close-up so you can see some of that texture up front, but this is part of the wear. So back here, this is what the finish is looking like. One of our subscribers, Gav2759, suggested purchasing this book, Classic Finishing Techniques by Sam Allen. It's a really good reference around how to use French polishing and shellac, and there's something here called a fad. This is the British technique, and I'm going to use a fad to actually apply this shellac. I'm just taking a nice soft cotton cloth here, and I want to fold it in a way that I don't have any wrinkles. So I'll bring this up here. Bring this up here. One more time over. And so there I've got something that I can put the shellac in, fold it over, and now apply it to the surface. So put my shellac here. This is a 2-pound cut. The initial soaking is going to take a little bit to get it through to the other side. And then I can start applying it. The technique is just bring it up from the very top. Got to get a little bit more in here. Okay, so it's now coming through. I'll just straighten out the cloth. And this is a touchdown, come to the end and lift off, just like this. This coat is dried, and I have to say I'm disappointed on how little finish is on there. So the technique I'm going to use is similar to what I've always been doing, and that is charge the cloth right on the front face and then sweep the finish on from one side to the other. That seems to be putting on more of a finish and builds up faster. The technique in that book was talking about French polishing. It's not really what I'm doing here. I'm looking to get on a couple coats of protective finish. I've got 3 more coats of shellac on here, so I've got a nice build-up, lots of protection for the wood. The area over here didn't come out perfect, but I'm putting a gallery on top of that, so you're not really going to see it. We'll give you a close-up. You can see the finish reflecting the light on the ceiling here. There are some imperfections in it, but given the state of the rest of the desk, I'll just come to the front here where this is used, and you can see a lot of imperfections here. I'm happy with what it is for this particular project. Now, this is far from a French polish. I've got another project coming up where I'm actually going to experiment with that for the first time, so I'll share that with you. I need to rub this down with steel wool just to take the sheen down, but first I've got a crack over on this side, if you remember from the wood movement. I'm fixing that at the end of the finishing process so I can match the color perfectly. I use burn-in sticks for this, so I just choose one that's close here, and then what I can do is put it in and see how it looks. I've got a battery operated soldering gun here, and just let that heat up. And then fill the void. So let that harden for a few seconds, and then I can peel back the excess, and we'll take a look at how well it's matching. Not too bad. There's a little bit of light color there, so I'm just going to grab a darker one. Add a little bit of color into it. So I'm just blending the new color with the existing color in that seam. So there are different colors going on here. It's really dark here, it's a little bit lighter there, a little bit lighter here. And this is why you can't use a wood filler first and then put the finish on, because you've got these color variations. This really is the best way to get a color match on your repair. I'll give you a close-up so you can take a look. So it's right here. All I need to do is rub it down with a little synthetic steel wool, and I'll wipe another coat of shellac on top, and you'll never know it's there. I'll leave a link up here on a video I did with Mohawk Finishes. It teaches you how to use the filler, and even on hardwood floors, how to fix some damage. Now, I've got out the rest of my finishing books here. This is my library that I rely on, and one of the things I've learned over the years is the finish needs to be rubbed out at the end. It's not good enough just to put a finish on. That finishing touch is the rub, and that gives you the feel you're looking for. It's typically 4/0 steel wool that we'd use for this. In some of these older books, that's what you're going to see. Newer technology are 3M abrasive pads, sometimes known as Scotch-Brite pads, and the white is the equivalent of the 4/0. So there are different colors here, but this is the one I'm going to use to rub out this finish, knock down that sheen, and get it to a nice satin look, the same as the rest of the body of this desk. You might be tempted on a pad like this to use your fingers and do this, but what you're doing is you're getting inconsistent pressure. What I find is if I put the palm of my hand on here and give it a push, this gives me a nice even pressure to work down the finish. So there you go. I've got it down to, I think, what's the right sheen. What I'm going to do now is assemble the top together, bring it back here, and I'll be able to tell for sure. I've got to elongate the holes on either end here so that this wood movement here doesn't cause further cracking where the screws were, and then I can assemble this with the gallery and then bring it back and take a final look.
Now that I've got all the screws in the right position, I have to deal with the wood movement across this board. And let me describe this. Across here, there's a number of screws. And this wood needs to expand and contract this way. But there's a screw here and a screw here. And I did elongate those holes, but because they're countersunk, they're still stuck in a single spot.
This countersunk screw has a wedge shape on it, and it's kept in that one area. So what I need to do is move to a flathead screw where I can elongate this hole here with a flat surface, and that will allow this flat surface to move this way and this way with wood movement. To cut the slot, I'll use my trim router and a straight cutting bit. Now you can see I've got a nice flat area for the pan head screw to be able to move up and down, and if I put the screw in the hole, you can see it can move as well. A public service announcement: respirators are something you should wear when you're creating dust like this. Wood dust can cause permanent lung damage and reduce your breathing capacity. It's also a carcinogen. When you're creating wood dust, it can hang in the air for up to 20 minutes, the stuff you can't even see. So what I'm going to do is take this outside, assemble it all together, and that way I can give you a better idea of how it's all come together. Attaching the top is a little bit tricky because I need to align these pins at the back. Now I have to line up the holes underneath and make sure that the roll top works. As I open it, you can see the unlock happening at the back there. So pull it forward, it works on the right side. Let's check the left. Unlock and lock. I'll put this in the unlock position and then I can put the drawers in. When restoring furniture, it's really up to the customer what they'd like to do. I recommended putting a lock set and a escutcheon plate on here, but they decided they wanted to keep this as it is. This finish is going to last for decades to come. I recommend using a coaster when you've got hot drinks or alcoholic drinks though, when you've got a shellac finish. My next project are these outdoor chairs. Outdoor furniture requires different techniques and adhesives to make sure they're going to last through the elements. If you haven't subscribed yet, click over here, click on that bell icon to get notified every time we publish a video. Thanks for watching Fixing Furniture.